Mikhail Gorbachev, the man who changed the course of history, the former Soviet leader who brought an end to the Cold War, has passed away at the age of 91. His death was announced on Tuesday by Russian news agencies who said he died at a central hospital in Moscow after a serious and long illness. Tributes immediately started pouring in. Gorbachev's relationship with President Vladimir Putin was difficult at times, but still Putin expressed his deep sympathies to the family. UN Secretary General called Gorbachev a one-of-a-kind statesman, while the European Union President Ursula von der Leyen praised him as a trusted and respected leader who opened the way for a free Europe. UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that he admired his courage and integrity. Meanwhile, US President Joe Biden called Gorbachev a rare leader who had the imagination to see a different future and the courage to risk his entire career to achieve it. Born on 2nd March in 1931, Gorbachev was one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. Gorbachev was regarded fondly in the West, where he was affectionately referred to as Gorby. He presided over the dissolution of a Soviet Union that had existed for nearly 70 years. When he took over the reins of the country in 1985, his biggest goal was to revive his country's stagnant economy and overhaul its political processes. His efforts became the catalyst for a series of events that ended the communist rule not just within the USSR, but also across its former satellite states. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990 for negotiating a historic nuclear arms pact with the US leader Ronald Reagan. His decision to withhold the Soviet army when the Berlin Wall fell a year later was seen as key to preserving Cold War peace. But as loved as he is by the West, at home, Gorbachev remained a controversial figure. For Putin and many Russians, the breakup of the Soviet Union was a tragedy, bringing with it decades of mass poverty and weakening of Russia's stature on the global stage. As the USSR collapsed, Gorbachev was succeeded by the younger Boris Yeltsin, who then became post-Soviet Russia's first president. And from then on, Gorbachev was relegated to the sidelines, devoting himself to educational and humanitarian projects. Over the years, many of the major achievements have been rolled back by President Putin. And for more details and analysis, joining us now is Nandan Unnikrishnan, who is a distinguished fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Thanks so much for joining us, Mr. Unnikrishnan. My first question, tell us a little bit about Mikhail Gorbachev's legacy. He was, of course, popular with the West, but a controversial figure back home in Russia.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, he was controversial. That can be seen from the fact that when he contested the 1996 election, he got less than 0.5% of the vote. So he came 7th out of 10 candidates. So you can imagine what the state of affairs was. But it would be unfair to blame him entirely for the dissolution of the Soviet Union. A substantial guilt, if you want, of that kind would probably be far more apt at the doorstep of Mr. Boris Yeltsin and a couple of other leaders of the Soviet Union at that time. As far as his legacy is concerned, it is very difficult to name one or two, but I will make an attempt at it. One is, of course, he withdrew Soviet troops from Afghanistan in 1989. Subsequently, he enabled the reunification of Germany. There were many military nuclear agreements that were signed with the United States, but there is a special poignancy also in his relationship with India. He and Rajiv Gandhi had a very good relationship. It is during Gorbachev's time that India receives its first nuclear submarine on lease. And it is during Gorbachev's time that Rajiv Gandhi's disarmament initiative is, Mr. Gorbachev is very supportive of that. So India and the Soviet Union had a very good relationship during Gorbachev's time. But there are others, of course, in Russia.
Right. That actually brings me to my next question. Interestingly, tributes have been pouring in from global leaders, but perhaps the most interesting one that the world is watching is Russian President Vladimir Putin. We know that he didn't have quite the most favorable opinion of Gorbachev. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I don't know if he didn't have a favorable opinion about Gorbachev, but he felt he had a problem with the entire Soviet leadership. Mr. Putin thought that the communists had devalued the values of Russia. Although Mr. Putin himself was a communist once upon a time, he is now reformed and has a slightly different worldview. He actually did not share, I would say, a very difficult relationship with Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev was invited to the Kremlin several times. Mr. Gorbachev had meetings with Mr. Putin. Of course, Mr. Gorbachev was critical of some of the steps that Putin undertook and never was shy of voicing his opinion. But I think Mr. Putin also understood that Gorbachev is a historical figure. He was the first and last president of the Soviet Union, and therefore treated him with adequate and requisite amount of respect.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Krishnan, for joining us with all the analysis on WION World is One.
Thank you.
WION World is One is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.